to the Production RoundTable series. We hope that everyone enjoyed their 4th of July weekend. Today, we're back in the office and we're going to be discussing some points amongst myself, Evan Clary, Michael Clary, and George Mills. First topic that we'll be discussing is when you're adding production capacity, how do you best match your need to a specific new or used piece of equipment?
Well, Evan, I think, the key thing I think about when you start this process, wherever you may start, just some discussion, is really the key is the data, collecting data and information, and you get a myriad of different approaches on how the data is presented. So putting them in some kind of common forum, and most likely, most people seem to prefer a spreadsheet kind of format so that you really know this. And not only would this have parameters of the machinery, but one of the most important things is collect the data that relates to the target piece of production you're trying to address. In other words, the size of the boxes, all the specs and parameters, so you can compare them to the machine that you're potentially looking at acquiring.
That's a good point. Taking a look at all the mins and maxes of the variety of boxes that you'll be running to see which fits in best. Where does cost and performance come into the analysis?
Well, I would say, Evan, that's a little lighter. You want to be collecting that data as it, comes to you from various suppliers and sources as you check people out. But at some point, you'll probably make a short list of, machines and whether they're new or used that meet your criteria, and try to narrow the search down a bit, because some really will not address your product properly. So I think this is very important. And then the other point is consider your product mix not just in sizes. Let's say you're going to look at a flexo folder gluer. Are you doing a lot of inline die cutting? We see more and more of that, and some machines are more equipped and suitable for handling that. And so you really want to understand that dynamic, where other machines, their focus could be on superior printing. So what are the strengths and weaknesses, and how do you put those together? But as you say, cost, first cost, ongoing cost, and service support are all items to be added to your analysis.
What's the process of analyzing a used piece of equipment versus a new piece of equipment when you're looking at cost and determination of spare parts, the condition of the used machine? I know that, people, it's kind of like buying a used car. You don't always know the history of a used car when you see it on the lot. And you drive it for 5 minutes and it might seem okay, but then you drive for 100 miles and then you start running into issues.
George, what do you think on that from kind of a technical, a design aspect? What are the best parameters that you've known on considering that?
Well, most of the time, people that buy a used machine pretty much pick up on what you said previously, Michael. They're going for a target, and they're going for it. The issue with the used machine is the original machine a machine that uses a certain quantity of spares per year for an average runtime, or is it a machine that requires more spares usage as time goes on? Different suppliers have different track records in doing this. Going back to my Langston days, nobody feared buying a Langston machine. They knew its gear train was sound, even if it was a 15-year-old machine. Other machines, people would buy it knowing that they might have to replace significant portions of the gear train or the backlash mechanisms, and they approached it knowingly. But it kind of goes back to another one of your points, Michael, where it was, do you want to optimize more on inline die cutting, or you want to optimize more on printing? If a guy was just printing black in number 1, red in number 2, he didn't matter that he was drifting. So it's a personal choice. But at the end of the day is if you look at it, when it comes full circle, if you had to totally rebuild a machine after you get it, you could pay as much as 70% of the cost of a new. I mean, you could go nuts and even more, but a typical could come in at 70% a new. So it's really, I guess, what your pocketbook can afford or what you're willing to risk, because at the same time with leasing machines today, you could go the new route and probably not cost you any more cost to own or cost to operate than a used machine.
Yeah, that's a good point, George. And thinking about what you said too with that, things about the used machine and my experience is a little indirect, not having sold used machines, but hopefully you can see the machine in service if you're really considering it. It's still in a production mode, so you can see it operating. And again, as it's advertised, everybody, presents the machine, and let's say it's fairly presented, but it's still not going to highlight some of the issues that you might say it's addressing. But if you see the machine and view it operating, and then talk to the operators in terms of not just saying what's wrong with it, but what is the strengths, what is the weaknesses, what items have you experienced in that. And then you can also think about and ask yourself or whoever your contact is in presenting that machine, why are they replacing the machine? So that will give you some insight. Let's say it's an older machine and they're replacing it with a very fast setup machine because they got a huge amount of business and limited floor space, and they would like to do very quick setups. You understand that, but you did not want to buy someone else's problem. I guess that's your point, because it can be a bit of a money pit. And then new machines, you have the new machine warranty. So at least, even though the machine is expensive, you don't have that downside immediately, if you take care of the machine.
Sure.
Yeah, I think one more point on that is, and this is going to sound personal, and it probably is, but let's go back to a Flexifolder gluer for a quick second. If you're buying a machine and everything looks good, and that customer, or I say customer, the seller, the question you need to ask them is what speeds did you run this machine at? Because if he comes back to you and says he only ran it at 180, a very interesting thing happens. If you try and run it at 200 and 240 and 250, you get into an accelerated wear situation where they try to catch up. I know people will debate that until the cows come home, but I can tell you it happens more than people realize, or they tend to find out. Is machines tend to take a set on the way they were operated the first time that they were. So if you try to run them in a different mode than they were previously, your risk goes up just a tad.
Plus, an interesting thing, George, it would not be out of line, I think, to ask to see some production records off the productivity of that machine. It can tell you a lot: setup times, downtime.
Yes, and if it's been running, it goes back to, I guess, Evan's prelude, where he says it's kind of like buying a car. If you buy a car that the little old lady only drove for 25 miles an hour going back and forth to church on Sundays, and it only had 5,000 miles kilometer, you think you got a great deal, but it's 15 years old and you take it out on the freeway, and at the end of the first month, it's in the shop.
It wants to know what happened all of a sudden. Why did my life change?
Yes.
What about buying a machine that's been retrofitted by other suppliers than the OEM? Are there any concerns about doing that when you take a look at maybe retrofitted print sections or things like that? I know I've seen several machines like that in the field.
I think that raises a bit of a red flag. You can't just say across the board, because there are some good retrofits and there are some bad ones, but you really want to see that, and hopefully that has not triggered some problems, kind of thing. So.
Okay. Let's move on to our second question. Just in general, what machine housekeeping tips do you have, and how important are these?
I guess by the question, Evan, we're going to focus on housekeeping and not really basic machine maintenance. You know, it's more the cleanliness and the order of the machine. Um, you know, it's always, you always notice a plant when it's very clean and well maintained. There's not a lot of scrap around, a lot of debris and this sort of thing. Number one, it's much safer to operate in a good orderly environment. And I always think of it as, even if the machine is well maintained, it's kind of like a car. It's in very good shape. As soon as you get it washed and waxed, it seems like it drives better, you know. And it's an old adage, but there's that feeling. And the other thing is, if you maintain a nice, clear, clean environment around the machine and with it, you notice things that are out of place. You know, if something is leaking, if something is not fitting properly, or you've got some ink that spilled, where did it come from? What happened? Where if you just have a sloppy environment, these things just blend in with all the other trash, so to speak. Now, the other thing along that too, thinking about that, Evan, is, you know, particularly, and you're thinking about the safety or certainly big problems, not just maintaining a clean environment, is any tools and things that you use around the machine. You should have some system of storing those things. Everything should have a home and a place, because sometimes these tools get put in precarious positions in and around the machine, and they end up going through the machine, causing damage and all kinds of bad things to happen. Plus, you find it quicker if you need it, and to make an adjustment or something, the machine is not sitting there idle while you scrummage through all the pile of junk on the desk.
Yeah, that's true. Are there any other housekeeping tips specific to the machines?
I would say, George, probably the biggest thing is in and around the printer, wouldn't you think, in terms of performance?
Well, absolutely, is because in the printer, you're chasing thousands or parts of thousands as part of your setup. And ink that tends to dry and build up, excuse me, tends to be almost like granite. It will eventually start to move things. And everybody, or I shouldn't say everybody, people will look at something and say, I got a little ink drip. You know, well, then it turns into a line, and the next thing you know, it's a stalactite. And the next thing you know, they can't keep their gap settings. Is you just can't let things get carried away. And it doesn't take a whole lot to set up a schedule, keeping it different from preventive maintenance, a housekeeping schedule. To every now and then go in there with hot water and a scrub brush.
Mm-hmm.
If you wait, it's going to take a whole day. If you do it from time to time, you don't even notice the time.
Yeah, I think, George, your comment on there, if you do it regularly, it's going in there with a brush and a little bit of water, clean it off, where I have literally seen in my experience service people coming in and their first tool is almost a chisel to get some of the dried up ink off so they can access bolts and so forth.
That's correct.
So it's just horrific. An interesting story, Evan, which is true, and George probably has a few to tell too. This goes quite a bit back, but an unnamed customer that was a privately owned customer, I remember, and there was one of these machines that was quite new, but was horrific condition in terms of housekeeping, dirty, and so forth. And I was going to bring it to his attention because he was concerned about some things, and mostly they were housekeeping. I was sitting in his very nice office in front of the building, a nice window overlooking the lawn and the parking lot. And he gave the keys to a young man to take his car to be serviced. And as we're sitting there, we heard the tires squeal as the young man left the parking lot. And he picked up the phone and told the receptionist to come have him see him as soon as he returns. He needs to speak to him. And I said, during the course of this conversation, I said, I imagine you're going to speak to him about how he was driving the car. He says, absolutely. I treat that car very nice. I said, well, that machine that you have out there cost about 5 times or 10 times what the car cost, and they're treating it much worse. We need some attention and consistency on this. So I don't know if he liked my comment, but it was a valid comment, because the machines are very expensive, and you need to treat them like it would be a car or another possession that you value.
Right. That's pretty timely that would happen right when you were sitting in his office.
Yeah, it didn't happen every time, but it did happen once, so it gave me the perfect lead in. Now, one of the things too, thinking about this housekeeping, I've seen some companies do that. They do audits, regular audits, to go through and kind of give themselves a grade. And it's very effective, because the old adage, if we measure it, it will improve,
Absolutely.
Yeah, very good. Our third and final question of the day, it's a little bit broad, but it says, value in cross-training operators. How is this best done, and what value does it pose to the company?
Well, that one, Evan, I think might have been brought forth maybe somewhat by, listeners on our current situation, because the virus and the impact of that with employees and attendance and so forth shows the need for that. We still need to operate. We've got to make boxes. We're an essential business to the industry. So how do we perform in that manner? And certainly we know people have skills, but we really want to recognize that is of value to the company, to have people cross-trained, and people that embrace that. Some people do, and some others don't, And for the employee that will embrace it, he is more valuable, whether that's recognition, compensation, bonuses, whatever, or opportunity for advancement, because what better for a supervisor or whatever to become multi-machine knowledgeable.
Yeah, that if they can, basically run every machine, then it's huge for the company.
Exactly, because it really gives you that backup inherent, somebody on the bench, so to speak.
I know that none of us are machine operators, but what do you think that cross-training process looks like? Starting and finishing training on one machine before moving on to the next?
George, what's your feeling on that?
My view on that is we typically follow the monkey see, monkey do training mentality. Going back to Evan's question, is let's just talk typical flexo folder gluer for a second, where you have a machine operator and a so-called second or helper. While he's the helper, he should learn about ink control. He can do it monkey see, monkey do. He should learn the functions as a second. He's not just there to be an off bearer or to make sure that he helps clear a jam. And once he has the knowledge of the basic process, he can move forward. It might be a good idea to not only pick up and train him equal to your primary operator, because then you can move them around, you can swap them. And I know of one of the smaller integrateds that while being an integrated, they still have a sheet plan environment in many of their locations. Their philosophy is that if you can operate one machine in their plant, if you stay with them long enough, you will learn to operate every machine in their plant. Anywhere from minis to jumbos, moving up. And it pays for itself, because it goes back to a little bit about what you said about with the COVID is if your people don't show up, if you're all cross-trained, you can decide what your primary stuff is for the day. The old school of, well, we'll just put the helper on and get what boxes we get off, doesn't do you a good, doesn't do your customer good, doesn't do anybody good in doing that. And you take these machine helpers, and to many of them, it's a boring job to begin with. Training them and teaching them something, you're probably not going to lose them. I think that's the biggest fear a lot of people have, that if I train them and I leave them as seconds, they're going to leave me. I don't think in today's environment or the modern times that actually does happen. and you're better off for it. And as I said, is maybe it's better for lots of people to look at the smaller sheet plan environments to see how they do it, because they're the ones that have learned by necessity to be the most flexible.
Yeah, that's an interesting point.
Yeah, following up, and George's comments prompt me on saying, you know, trying to motivate and getting the most out of people, identifying people who have additional skills or upward mobility. It can almost be something akin and linked to the HR function in terms of identifying goals for people and where they can progress and where their assets can be utilized in other positions of the plant or more responsibility. So in some ways, I think it's more like a personnel audit, you know, in terms of what is the skill set and where do we think you could progress your skill level and expand into in the company, and kind of write this down. Obviously, it's not just a mathematical thing that goes with it, but establish some goals, and then you've got to look for opportunities. But if you've identified those and the people you would like to move and try somewhere else or expose them to other things, then when things happen, for example, you have some service personnel that are coming in because a machine has a severe maintenance problem or is down for some reason, you can shift people over. So it's taking advantage of opportunities or just the product mix a given week. One machine may have a very light load. So some of the people, or at least one person that you're trying to cross train, you could move over somewhere else. And even if they weren't running the other machine or, you know, taking that much of a lead, they're exposed to it. It's kind of like George said, maybe it was a machine that does finer printing. They were exposed to the whole printing process and they were watching the lead operator, and you absorb a lot like that. So, and every personnel, if you would have their kind of secondary function over areas you would like to expose them to some, and then just be mindful as you're getting the schedule, you see the production load, which machines are going to run or not run. How can you utilize these people in a bit different mode that might be freed up at that time?
Yeah, I think it's important to analyze how to best train, because ultimately training is an investment from the company. They're investing time and money in people.
Exactly, because it's almost like all of us enjoy our sports and watch it. Because if a game is a bit out of hand, you may put a rookie in or someone in to get some game time experience. You look for those opportunities because what if someone's injured? You don't want that to be their first experience in a real game. So it's the same way with the plan. It's kind of game time planning. And if you get in a certain mode that you can afford to do a little of that backup training, take advantage of it.
Yeah. That's very interesting. I mean, it is important. I can see the importance, especially with today and the coronavirus, the COVID-19 situation, of the importance of cross-training. I mean, God forbid a plant gets, you know, a number of cases, all of a sudden their operators aren't showing up to work. It's important to have people that can still run the machine so they can function, you know.
Exactly. And we all become dependent on some key man on that machine, and he may be the best operator. It's kind of like that key quarterback. But if you're in a critical game and he is not available due to injury or family circumstance, you still have to play the game.
Yeah. Do you have any suggestions on developing standard procedures so that we avoid some of the operator black magic, where they have their own specific ways to run the machine, and developing consistencies in the way that the machine is run by different people throughout different shifts? Would that just be a standard operating procedure or work instructions? What would you think?
That's sort of a delicate balance, but it works. And the easiest thing that comes to mind is to think back maybe a decade or so ago when people were really big into this ISO. And one of the themes with ISO is say what you do what you say. When you write out the work functions in doing it, it's hard. A lot of times people don't want to do that. you would basically need somebody from your office or in your HR to basically have the person interview the person, the operator, and transcribe for them. They don't like to write, perhaps, in doing that, because black magic is good. An operator can make you or break you. And sometimes you don't know where he's at in the equation. All you know is you're making in doing that. So is maybe you don't do it under the older ISO auspices. You just do it. Is say what you do what you say, or turn it around. Is what you're doing, tell me, and write it out, and then that becomes your own internal SOP, standard operating procedure, in doing it. You may pick up a few bad habits in that as it goes along. I don't know. But that's the easiest way to make it above and beyond monkey see, monkey do. As part of the learning.
And as you say too, George, you get a baseline like that, and just thinking about it, I've seen, and we all have, they take great videos and so forth, is just going through a video and almost making your own training film, standard procedure, so forth. And then it's easier almost to write out these protocols from the video, because you can stop it, you can pause, and you can see all the nuances. And as you say, if we're doing some things that are a bit out of the norm, and I'll evaluate that. Should we be doing it, or are we compensating for something about the machine that needs maintenance or correction?
Right.
That's true. And to pick up on that even further, is our industry doesn't partake of it as much as I think they can. There are third-party people out there that know how to do what we're talking about. They may not know corrugated, but they know how to do it. They know how to get to that guy to make him a subject matter expert as part of their interview of that guy. And then they'll turn it around and they'll put it in a animated presentation for you. It's not cheap, but there are companies that are known to do that and do it quite effectively. Other industries almost exclusively use these third-party learning companies to put things together for them. And someday maybe we will. I think our industry hopes that the suppliers eventually do it, but we will see. But it's another option. There are third-party people out there. Some are better than others that could basically take everything that you do. And I think, in some respects, I think closer to a baseline. I think AICC has the baseline videos. If you look at the ICC, at least they did in the past.
I didn't know that, but that's a useful resource.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know the level. I've never partaken of them. But I know that going back to your original theme, Evan, is good training makes you the most efficient operator going.
Yeah.
Not operation as opposed to operator. Yes.
Well, and I think, Evan, too, is what George is saying. You document the process. If you document the process, then you can evaluate it. And then even if you have representatives from that machine manufacturer, other people in, you can display what you're doing, what the result is, and you have data there to do. And is this normal? Should this be expected? Is this a normal protocol, or is it an aberration? Is there something we can correct or do it better? So you establish some baselines.
Definitely. Yeah, that would be very useful to have show your current procedures to the machine manufacturer.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's kind of like taking your car to the shop. It will never do whatever problem it was doing when you take it.
Exactly. Well, I think that wraps up our questions. Do you guys have anything else?
No, I think it's good. I think you have some new guests on tap, so we may not be seeing you for a while.
Next week, well, actually 2 weeks from today, we'll be having Peter Sauer join us for the Production RoundTable from Sauer Systems. So we're definitely looking forward to that.
Oh, that would be very good.
Good,
but
very good.
We're going to have more visitors coming on the show, so we'll see. But I'm sure you guys will be involved in the process. You're not going to be kicked out.
We're not totally retired, huh? All right.
Not yet.
Thanks, Evan.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
We're good.